Hi. Okay, so I'm sorry for being so late. I'm not muted. Y'all do not ever listen. Basic respect because I have that for a reason. I have that for a reason because I know my mic could be off. And I only ask one thing of everybody. Only use it if I am actually muted. That's all I ask. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I have it for a reason, only to be used if I'm not muted. Which I said many times, and it's in my rules. Only use it if I'm actually muted. I didn't even change the damn category. Oh my god. Didn't even change the title. Nothing. Oh my god. There we go. Okay, cool. Okay, I got everything set up now. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm a bit late. because I was like, yeah, because yeah, so something like my original what I'm streaming from like was off, and I couldn't figure out why, because it's usually on, and I thought it like ran out of like it ran out of, I thought it like wasn't plugged in. I'm like, oh shit. So I like found my webcam that I originally used, and I'm just like, why is it not turning on? So I was just bit, oh, okay, so that's going on. But I just had to turn it on. And also, as you can tell, I now have a clock. I think I could probably like make it smaller. Okay. 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 Hi, Coco. Okay. Okay. So, today is the start of the new book from Reading Corner. And it's a themed book. I've never read this book before. It is it is a recommendation from one of my friends, and they seem to really like it. And it's on theme for this month, Valentine's Day, the month of love. Okay. I forgot to think of music. Let's see. Ooh, my favorite. It is. It is. It has been well. It has been well. Took a nap. Okay. 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 Got everything ready. Also, my YouTube chat. Yeah, when it's always cold, I just like tend to nap more. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. What did I do? Okay. Hmm. Night, Sammy. Really like Tchaikovsky. Yeah, we're gonna go with this one. That's fine. Okay. Okay, yeah, let's just get into it. It's gonna be like about 2 hours. 2 hours at most. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. I think. Okay, I think I got it. Okay, cool, cool, cool. Okay. Oh yeah, I'm just like yeah, sorry, I'm just setting up. I had like a lot of stuff happen like 10 minutes before stream and I'm just like, "Oh no." Okay. Okay. I got a good volume that it could be left at. Cool, cool. Okay. Okay. So, you said new month that's themed for this month. New book. Yeah, new. Yeah, just for this month. And I'm really happy that I found my Hatsune Miku, wait, Hatsune Miku, bookmark is so, it fits so well with this book, with the book color. So yeah, so it's called The Spell Shop. Like I said, I've never read this before, so okay. All right. I think I got everything set up. Okay. Everything seems to be set up. All right. Okay. So. All right. So. Let's get to it. Also, I don't know. Also, I don't even know how the hell they say their names, but you know what? We're just doing it. All right. All right. I'm honestly thinking that I'm just gonna say the names how I think they're said. Kayla never thought the flames would reach the library. She was dimly aware that the most of other librarians had fled weeks ago, when the revolutionaries took the palace and defenestrated the emperor in a rather dramatic display. Defenestrated? I don't know. But surely they wouldn't touch the library. After all, there were books here. Highly flammable, irreplaceable books. The great library of Elysium, with its soaring spires, stained glass windows, and labyrinth bookshelves, was the jewel of the Crescent Islands Empire. Its hollowed stacks were filled with centuries-old treatises, history, studies, and most importantly, in Kayla's opinion, spell books. Only the elite, the creme de la creme of the scholars, were allowed to even view the spell books, as only the rarefied few were permitted by Imperial law to use magic. She was responsible for the spell book from the 3rd floor, East Wing. For the past 11 years, she worked, slept, ate, and lived between the shelves, which perhaps explained why, when she first smelled smoke, she thought she simply left toast on the cook plate. Just to be on the safe side, earlier in the week, Kayla and her assistant Kaz had begun securing some of her favorite tomes in crates and stowing them on one of the library boats, though she never truly believed evacuation would be necessary. Cocooned within the stacks, far away from the whiff of politics or violence, it was a pleasant game. If If she were stranded in a deserted island, which books would she most want to have there with her? Certainly the Grimoire Plant Work, compiled in the year 357 by scholar Masembe in Canon. I don't fucking know how to say these names, so just like bear with me. As well as the manipulation of weather patterns, a study of the effects of spellwork and the breeding habits of eastern puffins, which was a fascinating and groundbreaking work, Beth. Kaz swung by his leaves into the aisle where she sat cross-legged in front of a pile of books. A spider plant. A spider plant? This me in plant form. Spider plant, he had roughly the size. A spider plant, he was roughly the size of a farm dog, but comprised entirely of greenery with a knot of roots holding soil in its core. What kind of fucking plant is this? Now I'm wondering what it looks like. He was the smartest assistant she'd ever had. Oh! Oh! Kaz is the spider plant! Oh! Okay. He was the smartest assistant she'd ever had. Though also, perhaps not coincidentally, the most anxiety prone. We're going to die, he informed her, his leaves rustling so badly that it was challenging to pluck out the words. The fighting won't come here, Kayla said in the soothing voice she perfected after years of working in such a sacred space. She added another book to the pack in the fifth crate pile, then reconsidered and shifted into the pack only if it fits pile. He shook his leaves at her. The fighting is already here. They've battered down the front door and are ransacking Kinney Hall. Goodness! The doors to Kinney Hall was a monstrosity built of brass and secured with bolts made of the sturdy lumber used for the ribs of ship hulls. She tried to calculate the amount of force required to batter down the 30-foot door, that then blinked. Ransacking, did you say? A 30-foot door? Jesus Christ! She'd expected the rebels to secure the library and its treasures. That was only sensible, but ransacking? These were freedom fighters, not feral animals. She wasn't even opposed to their goal. On Kaz's recommendation, she'd read a few of their pamphlets in the early days of the revolution, and the call for elections and the sharing of knowledge seemed quite appealing. The North reading room is on fire, Kaz said. They lit the tapestries first and spread to the scrolls. She felt sick. All those old manuscripts? He tugged on her sleeve with a leaf. Come on, Kayla. Kyla? I'm gonna say Kyla, not Kayla. We have to leave. Leave? Now she hadn't finished. If you make a leave joke, Kaz warned, I'm going without you. She got to her feet. The fifth crate was only half filled. Kyla dumped an armload of the books into it without even checking what the titles were. Enough, Kyla! Kaz said as she went for a second armload and then maneuvered it toward the lift. On wheels, it scooted between the shelves and she felt a lurch in her stomach. as he passed all the full shelves of beautiful, wonderful books. She snagged a few more favorites as he hurried past. Reaching the lift, she shoved the wheeled crate inside and yanked down the gate. Cass pushed a button with the leaf and turned the crank. The lift lurched and then descended. As he traveled between the floors, Kyla heard the sound of metal clashing on metal, and her stomach flopped. She didn't know firsthand what a battle sounded like, but she did know what a library was supposed to sound like, and all this was terrible, horribly wrong. Cass crept closer to her, and she wished the lift would go faster. What if it stopped on one of the floors with fighting? What if it stopped altogether? She pushed the sub-level button again and again as if it would encourage it. The lift continued to inch toward with clanks and squeaks and whirs. The stench of smoke grew stronger. Looking out through the great gate, she saw haze shrouded the stacks. "We should have taken the stairs," Kaz said. "We've never been able to carry the books," Kyla said. "We won't save any books if we're dead." He shook so hard that several of his leaves detached and floated on the floor. "Gah, I'm shedding." "You need to think about something else," she said. "Oak trees are struck by lightning more often than any other trees." Apples can float because they are 25% air. You can count the number of cricket chirps per second to calculate the outside temperature. What? I wonder. Maybe? Huh. Now I'm curious about that. Maybe you can? Who knows? Unless outside is on fire, Kaz said. How fast do they chirp if it's all on fire? Damn. The lift lurched as it reached the lowest level. Kyla yanked the gate open while Kaz maneuvered the crate with his tendrils, shoving the crate outside, then exited the elevator. This far down, water level, she couldn't hear the clang of metal or smell the stench of smoke. It was overwhelmed by the ripe fish odor and the canal that flowed beneath the library. All the city of Elysium was riddled with canals. It was part of what made it one of the world's most beautiful cities, the jewel of the empire. Kylie remembered when she first arrived, very young before her parents died, how impressed she'd been by the sparkling canals, the lace-like white bridges, the spires and the flowers that blossomed on every balcony, draped from every window and framed every door. She wondered how much of the city she remembered was left. Hurrying through the narrow stone passageway with the wheeled crate, she listened for any other movement. But all she heard was the slosh of water against stone and drip, drip, drip of a leak somewhere nearby. Ahead were the boats. Anchored in slips beneath the library, the boats were used to transport books to and from selected patrons on nearby islands. Each had silver sails tied tight around its boom. And a black cherry hull wide enough to transport multiple crates of books, but sleek enough to be sailed by a single librarian. Oh. She herself had used one just last winter to deliver a full set of Scholar Sepavia's examination of the function of forest spirits in fact and fiction to a bedridden emeritus sorcerer. He'd had his housekeeper offer her a cup of tea as thanks, but she declined, wanting to hurry back to the comfort of her stacks. At least those books were safe. That was only slight consolation. though compared to the wealth of knowledge and perils above her. Hold on. I think I found it. Okay.
Send help is the
Okay. Okay. This is loud. Oh my god. She'd refilled her boat with the first 4 crates of books secured beneath a tarp. Maneuvering the half-filled 5th crate onto the boat, she strapped it in. There was room for at least 3 more crates, but there wasn't time to fetch them. She wished she'd sorted books faster, or be less picky. She wished she'd packed more provisions. She'd stowed a few jugs of water, as well as jars of preserved peaches, a bag of dried beans, and a sack of pecans. For Kaz, she had a tub of fresh soil that could replenish himself in. And she'd also hidden a couple of changes of clothes for herself, as well as a few blank notebooks just in case. But she hadn't emptied her cubicle in the library of her personal items. She thought wistfully of all she had left, her old journals, her best quill set, a wood carving in the shape of a mermaid that her parents had given her when she was a child. But Cass was right. Better to save themselves and the books. We'll come back when it's safe, she thought. This is just temporary. Oh, honey. Climbing into the boat, Kyla untied the line and pushed off. She pulled out the pole for navigating the watery tunnels. The sails were wrapped up around the boom. They'd stay down until they reached the open water. She wasn't technically supposed to take the boat, or the books, or Kaz. They had been no one left to ask, and she reassured herself that they'd thank her later, when she returned. It wasn't theft, it was her job, taking care of the collection. I'm just broadening the definition. She pulled through the tunnels until they flowed out into the open canals of the city. Well, this is absolutely horrible, Kaz said. Kyla had to agree. Stars were blotted out by the smoke that rose from the bridges and spires. The flames cast everything in a ghoulish light, and the sour taste of smoke coated the back of her throat. She felt it invading her lungs with each breath. Her sky blue skin looked sickly in the unnatural light, and her dark blue hair soaked sky blue skin. Oh. Soaked up the scent of smoke. Down on the canals, Kyla and Kaz were free from the worst of it, but they weren't free from the sights and sounds of death. Later, she'd blocked out most of the horrible night. The screams, the corpses in the canal, the fear that choked her worse than the smoke. The trip, although the trip through the canal felt endless, and the sounds traveled across the water even as they broke into the open sea. The trip to the canal felt endless, and the sounds traveled across the water even as they broke into the open sea. With Kaz's help, Kyla raised the silver sails once the water was too deep for the pole. She learned how to sail as a small child and had delivered enough books scattered over the years to stay in practice, so she thankfully didn't have to think to perform the tasks. Her hands remembered what to do, how to catch the wind in the canvas, how to speed away. Oh no. Behind them, the great city burned, with its people, both good and bad, and its history, both good and bad, and its books and its flowers, and she knew she wasn't coming back. Ah, that's so sad. As the sun rose over the sea, all pink and yellow and hopeful, Kyla resolved to look forward, not backward. There was no one in Elysium who'd miss her, which was a depressing thought in and of itself. Really? No one? Absorbed in her work, she hadn't left the library for anything but the occasional book delivery in. Had it been years? Yes, years. After she finished school, she'd simply move directly into a cubicle sandwiched between the stacks. It had been simpler that way. She hadn't had to waste any time traveling to and from her work. She had no family in the city, and she'd lost track of her classmates. They drifted off into their lives, and she'd fallen into the routine of hers. All her meals were delivered, prepared fresh at any hour. Scholars often kept odd hours, and therefore so did librarians. She merely had to send a request down the chute, and everything would arrive via lift in a timely manner. No interactions with anyone required. She'd considered it the perfect system. She is so real for that. Like, real. She is so real. Just making her own little cubicle in the library, which sounds fantastic. I would love to live in that library that she's describing. librarians. Also, the fact that she could just send a request and boom. Just right there, food instantly. I would love to have that. Just put a request down the chute and then boom, my snacks. Sag can't live in a nice library. The other librarians, they had their own work on other floors and other wings. Kyla never liked to disturb anyone, and she had gently, so gently that she didn't even realize she was doing it, discouraged others from disturbing her. As the sailboat bounced over the waves, she realized she hadn't even spoken to another soul besides Kaz in 3 weeks. The last person she talked to was a janitor, whom she'd shooed away from stirring up dust near some particularly fragile manuscripts. It wasn't that she didn't like people. It was that only she liked books more. They didn't fuss or judge or more. They didn't fuss or judge or mock or reject. They invited you in, flopped up the pillows on the couch, offered you tea and toast, and shared their hearts with no expectations that you'd do anything more than absorb what they had to give. Oh, she is so real for this? Damn. Low-key, Kyla's real for this. All of which were very lovely, but it left her in a bit of a quandary. Where to go? Now that her old life had quite literally burned down, Kaz, she began. He said, muffled. She glanced across the boat to see he'd wedged himself between 2 of the crates and had wound his leaves tight around his roots ball. Kaz, what are you doing? Fish eat plants, he said. Some fish, yes. She wasn't overly familiar with the dietary preferences of fish. She knew there were fish who liked kelp. She supposed they ate plankton too. Also insects. Some fish eat other fish. Who eat plants? I suppose so. Everything can eat plants, Cass said, but barely anything eats books. That's why I'm positioning myself between the crates. No one will think of looking for a fresh, tasty morsel of green next to so many dead trees. So I'm just going to stay here with the books till we get to wherever we're going, which I hope won't have fish, sheep, cows, or goats. He shuddered at the word goats, and Kyla wondered if he'd had a bad experience with a goat, or had just read about them. Plants. He is so real for this. Hold on. He is so real. That's so funny. He's scared of goats. Oh my god, the fact that, I don't know, it's just so funny that he's scared of goats. Most likely the latter. Livestock wasn't permitted in the Great Library for obvious reasons. This is what I wanted to talk to you about, Kyla said. We need a destination. Yes, you. Didn't plan that out? You didn't plan that out? I didn't think we'd really have to leave, she admitted. Or I thought if we did, we'd have just a few hours or days, a week at most. She thought they could rent a slip in a harbor. at one of the nearby islands, perhaps Varsant or Eva, and stay a couple of days at one of the charming inns where the lesser nobles liked to vacation. Kaz sagged, his leaves dripping as if they never tasted water. So did I. Aww, baby Pliny is so sad. They sailed silently. It was a gloriously beautiful day for a sail. Light breeze, cheerful lemon light flashing in the water. Seagulls flew overhead, cawing to one another. The many islands of the Crescent Islands Empire. If it was an empire anymore, thanks to the revolutionaries, looked peaceful from the distance. If you didn't look back to where smoke still stained the sky over the capital city. The island's gray, white, and black cliffs were majestic, and the sweet little fishing villages looked quaint, with their brightly painted houses, cheerful gardens, and cobblestone streets. She and Kaz could sail into one of their harbors and then do what? She couldn't afford an inn for more than a couple of days. The coins that Kyla had brought with her wouldn't go far. Even if she could pay the harbor fee, she didn't relish living on the boat, day in and day out. She resolved not to panic. She'd think as she sailed, and an answer would come to her. Across the water, she saw a herd of mer horses rise and fall with the waves. Her breath caught in her throat, half horse and half fish. They were a magnificent sight. She watched, mesmerized, as they cantered through the water. Their hoofs crashed through the waves, and their powerful fishtails propelled them forward. Wait, I think I know. Oh. I think I've seen pictures of something like this. Covered in jewel-like scales and made of solid muscle, they were the living embodiment of both beauty and strength, like the sea itself, Kyla thought. One of them tossed its mane, and droplets sprayed up on caught the light, a flash of rainbow. Caltree, Kyla said. Excuse me? It's an island. I've never heard of it. I'd be surprised if you had, Kyla said. It's tiny and remote, far to the north. It doesn't fall on any of the shipping lanes. The locals herd mer horses to aid with their fishing. Curious, Kaz lifted himself up between the crates and perched on one to look out across the ocean. Why do you know about it? Oh, don't tell me you read about it. Actually, no. It's where I was born. Oh. She heard a hitch in her voice and she swallowed hard. She hadn't thought of Caltree in years. She didn't know why she was thinking of returning would make her feel so jumbled. Her parents had left as soon as they could afford it to seek a better life in the capital city. They'd wanted to experience life in Elysium, and they wanted Kyla to have the kind of opportunities they, growing up on a remote island, never had. She'd been barely 9 years old at the time, but she still remembered the island with its cliffs and farms and gardens. The sole village on the island, also called Caltree, was 3 cobblestone streets wide, with a mill by a waterfall and a school that was housed in an old barn. She remembered the way it looked at sunset, with the island's winged cats. They had winged cats?! I want to live here. Winged cats perched on the rooftops, and the way it smelled at dawn of fresh baked bread. In spring, wildflowers sprouted everywhere, the roots, the cliffs, the fields. In winter, snow blanketed everything in thick white fluff. She used to think hot milk with chocolate mixed in and watch the snow fall on the sea. Kyla? Kaz prodded. I think I have a house there. She knew her parents hadn't sold it. So far from the heart of the empire, it wouldn't have sold for much, and Kyla's father wanted to hold on to it in case they decided to retire there after they had their fill of the city life, though Kyla's mother had loved the city too much to ever want to return. I suppose that means I inherited it. Bro. Certainly there was no one else who could have. She had no other family. If no one has moved in, and if it hasn't fallen down, it's small, just a cottage, but It was beautiful. At least it was beautiful in her mind, preserved in her memory, as lovely and fragile as a soap bubble. Now it was probably infested with bats, mice, and bears? Why would bears be infesting her place? And the roof had most likely caved in. I just never expected to go back there. At least not without them. Is it nice? Very, I think. It could have changed. I've changed. She'd lost her magenta freckles and the blue pigtails years ago, and she'd gained an advanced degree in library studies and the host of antisocial tendencies. Oh gosh, she is so real. Okay then, Kaz said. Let's go to your island. Catching the wind, she steered the boat north. Just to be clear, they don't have goats, do they? I'm sure there were no animals anywhere in Culture that eat plants. Kyla said as they picked up speed. The boat bounced over the waves. Excellent! Wait, are you just saying that to make me feel better? Yes, she said. Grumbling, he squished himself back between the crates of spellbooks as he sailed northward toward their future in her past. Are you just saying this? I love her already. Only a few pages in. That was so funny. She's so real. I love that for her. As the sun stained the horizon orange, Kyla sailed toward a little cove on the island of Cultree. It was like a mile east of the village and its harbor. Tucked behind a veil of rocks and trees, she aimed the boat between the rocks. You're going to crash, Kaz observed. I'm not going to crash. I'm going to dock. Inside the cove, there used to be a wooden dock that belonged to her family's cottage. She remembered she used to squat on the end and watch the fish dance in the water. At low tide, she'd be able to see crabs scuttling over the rocks. And at high tide, mer babies would swim around the dock posts before they were called out to sea by their parents. A sighting that locals said was good luck. She wasn't, of course, entirely certain the dock would still be standing. But she supposed she could drop anchor and they could wade to shore. Or she could just beach the boat, provided she could avoid slicing the hull of the rocks. Oh god. This girl. One hand on the rudder, she guided the sailboat around the rocks into the cove. Kaz clambered up on the mast, using his tendrils to climb for a better view. With the light so low in the sky, the cove was coated in shadows. Yeah, I really like this character, Kyla. Kayla, I don't know. I don't know what her name is. It's something. hell do you mean? Why am I dropping frames? Hello? One second. Okay, I don't know what's going on. Most likely it's just my internet, which is weird because I'm literally hooked up to the damn the damn router. Who knows? Okay, there we go. One hand on the rudder, she guided the sailboat around the rocks and into the cove. Cat climbing the mast using his tendrils to climb.
With Ashley's next-gen Nuvella performance
clambered up the mast and using his tendrils to climb for a better view. On the sky, the water looked near black, and the trees with the rocky cliffs behind them cast even more shadows. It was silent except for the lapping of the waves on the rocky shores and the call of an unseen bird from one of the pine trees. This world building is quite nice. I love this. But despite the shadows, it didn't feel unwelcoming. As he drifted deeper into the cove, it felt as if the shadows were embracing them, in the same way that a thick nest of blankets did on a chilly night. Kyla spotted the old dock, right where it was supposed to be. It was more rickety than she remembered, though. About a third of the slates were missing, like the smile of an old man who had lost some of his teeth. Luckily, the posts were there, sturdy but coated in seaweed. Using the pole, she sidled the boat up next to the dock and tossed a line around a post. Yanking on the line, she dragged them closer and tied a bowline knot. She remembered her mother teaching her how to make this exact knot on this very same dock. It felt both like just yesterday and a lifetime ago. Poor girl. I don't know. She shook her head to chase the memory away. Clambering over the crates, Kyla pulled the sail down and wrapped it tight against the boom. Cass was perched on one of the book crates. I am not walking on that. You'd rather swim? I'd rather stay on the boat, he said. Kyla sighed and rubbed her eyes. She never felt this bone marrow deep tired before. Even when she stayed up all night with her books, it was never like this. Between the streets of their escape and the effort of their night and all-day sail, she felt like a book so well read that its pages curled and spine cracked. I feel like this is a bit loud. I can carry you. I was quiet. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "That's undignified. You think the shrubbery is going to mock you?" The shrubbery. If he had eyes, she'd expected he would have rolled them at her. "Fine, carry me, but only if you tell no one. Only if you tell no one." "Who am I going to tell? I don't know anyone here, and don't want to." She scooped him up, and careful to gather all the soil that clung to his exposed roots. It felt like holding a very plump and very leafy toddler. His tendrils draped over her shoulders, and he grumbled as she adjusted her grip. We're going to lay low, keep to ourselves, and avoid trouble. With luck, none of the locals will even know we're here. Kyla tapped the nearest slat of wood with her toe. It seemed sound enough. Cautiously, she lifted her weight and was pleased when the dock held. Kaz's leaves flattened around her back. She carried him carefully as she stepped from slat to slat, resting each one before she trusted it. At last, she reached the shore. He climbed down from her arms to the ground. Shaking out his leaves, he groomed himself with his tendrils. He looked a bit like a cat licking his fur. "We won't ever speak of that again." "Of course," she agreed. She looked up from the knot of greenery in front of them. There used to be a path, with stairs carved into the rocks, but all she could see was a tangle of vines cascading down the hill. Frowning at it, she paced in front of the green. The stone steps should still be there, if she could find... Ah, there! Taking away a few vines, Kyla uncovered the first step. Found it. "Found what?" Kaz asked. "The way home." She felt the word vibrate through her. Step by step, she climbed, with Kaz behind her, clearing the steps as best as she could. She was only able to uncover a few inches, but it was enough. By the time she reached the top, the sun was completely down. Bathed in the silvery gray of twilight, the cottage waited for them. She wanted to feel as if they'd made it. She was home, they were safe, and everything would be easy from now on. But the cottage was nearly as enveloped in vines as the stairs. She couldn't tell where the walls ended and the green began. Oh, poor girl. Her former home looked one gulp away from being swallowed entirely. "It's nice," Cass said.
Hello there.
"Hi, Nina." I'm good. Nina, I think you'll like this book so far that I'm reading. I'm only like 2 chapters in, but the main character, I love her. You're fine. Girl, I'm streaming. You're fine. You're fine. I also like engaging with my chat, so you're fine. But yeah, this main character so far, she's actually really funny. Okay. We do love a funny MC. And she has a talking plant. She's never seen a pet companion. I don't know. This world, they have, what is it? Apparently they have mer horses. They have mer horses, mermaids, cats with wings, apparently. So, I don't know. I'm really digging this world. Eggs, yeah, they got it all. I like how the talking plants is the crazy part. Yeah, the talking plants being the crazy part is the funniest thing. Alright, where was I? It's nice, Cass said. Now who's lying? Kyla said. It has a roof and walls. He was right about that. It could be worse. An owl hooted much too close, and Kyla jumped. Cass skittered behind her. So apparently it's Kaz is the plant, and apparently he's like a type of plant called the spider plant. And I'm like, oomph, unintentionally. Cousin. Oomph, different breed. Kaz skidded behind her. She forced herself to breathe and calm down. It didn't look as if anyone was living in the house, which was good. She could have come back to find squatters or new owners if the locals had decided there was no more living relatives who might return to claim it. Apparently. She couldn't vouch for how many mice, birds, or other critters had taken up residence inside. She wished they'd arrived earlier so it wouldn't look so dark in there. Should we go in? Kaz said. Kaz asked. Yes, maybe? No? She wanted to retreat to the boat, sail back to Elysium, and sequester herself in her nice, warm, safe cubicle deep within the stack of books, where she knew what to expect out of every night and every day. If she went into the house, what would she find? And if she didn't, what would happen then? She hated not knowing which was the right choice. Have I made a terrible mistake coming here? The owl hooted again. We go in, Kyla said. They approached the front door. It felt like walking up to the mouth of a slumbering beast. It was ajar, with dead leaves clogging the entranceway. She nudged them out of her way with her foot and leaned against the door to push it open further. It squeaked loudly, as if it hadn't moved in years, which was entirely possible. Stepping inside, Kyla waited for her eyes to adjust. The last gaps of day shed a grayish light through the windows that weren't blocked by vines. It was enough to see shapes, chairs, she guessed, and a table. She matched the shadows to her memories and was surprised to find that it felt familiar. Like a half-remembered old tale. The wood-burning stove and, yes, there, squatting like a hulking creature with a chimney rising from its back. A daybed used to be in the front corner. That's where she used to sleep, and her parents' bedroom butted off the back. A kitchen area with a sink and a window that overlooked the back garden should be to her left, beyond the table. She couldn't see that in the darkness though, and it made her feel like she'd walked into a surreal kind of dream, with pieces of memories overlaid by shadows. She wondered how Kaz felt about the place. If you'd rather, we could spend the night in the boat and explore this in the morning, she offered. Sleep on the boat? Kaz sounded appalled. With fish under us? You really have a thing about fish. I had no idea, she said. Apparently he doesn't like fish because he knows some fish eat like seaweed and stuff. You hear stories, he said darkly. Do you? Do you really? She navigated across the room, leaves crunching underfoot, and found the daybed, exactly where she remembered it. It seemed smaller, though, and dustier. Lifting the quilt, she shook it, and twigs and leaves and dust flew into the air. She coughed. Setting the quilt aside in a heap, she pushed her hands against the mattress. It hadn't disintegrated, which was a plus. She supposed it would hold her, and under where the quilt had lain, it wasn't that dusty, at least in comparison. It wasn't as if after sailing through the night and all day, she was particularly clean anyway. Hey, there's a hole in the floor, Kaz said, pleased. I can root here for the night. Could she sleep here? After their escape and long sail, she should be able to sleep anywhere. If mice or raccoons or whatever murder her in the night, at least I'll get some rest. Imagine like a just thug raccoon. This thug raccoon's coming out of nowhere. Gingerly, she lay down on the little bed. It creaked but didn't collapse. The quilt was the velvet soft of worn cotton, and the mattress cradled her as she sank into it. It smelled like dust and little like roses. She felt her neck and shoulders begin to unknot. Outside, the owl hooted softly. At dawn, as Dawn pried his fingers into the vine-covered cottage, Kyla opened her eyes and screamed when she saw a man standing in the doorway with a scythe in his hands. I would scream too! She tried to jump to her feet, but the little daybed couldn't handle the quick movement. It toppled over and she spilled onto the floor. The man rushed forward. Kyla screamed again. She is so real for this! He backpedaled, leaned his scythe against the wall, held up his hands, palms out. Sorry, very sorry, didn't mean to startle you. He had a deep voice, soothing. She'd never seen him before, which wasn't a surprise since she hadn't been here in ages. He wasn't what she'd call handsome, but he didn't look like a murderer either. Not that she knew what that would look like. She's so real. Not that he was tall, which wasn't an argument for or against murderer. He must have had to duck through the doorframe. He also appeared stronger than the average library goer. Judging by his arms, he looked as if he'd pick up one of her book crates one-handed, or crush her throat with his pinky. Damn, girl! I think she's over-exaggerating, not gonna lie. None of that was at all reassuring. She got to her feet and scanned the cottage quickly. She didn't see the spider plant anywhere, and she felt panic rise up from her stomach. Kaz, are you okay? Did he hurt you? Hands still out, the man said in the same soft deep tone. I didn't hurt anyone or see anyone else. There was only you here when I came in. Her heart was thumping wildly in her ribcage, even though he hadn't made any threatening moves beyond coming into the place where she was sleeping and scaring her half to death. It was terrifying enough that he was large, male, and here. And I don't see Kaz. Why are you here? She demanded, trying and failing to keep the shake out of her voice. Who are you? What do you want? Mildly, he said, I had planned to ask you the same questions. This house had been abandoned for years, but that doesn't mean it isn't someone's home. It's mine, she kind of said, my home. It was. Is. Ah, he said. He waited for her to explain further. My name is Kyla Orobadan. My parents lived here, and my mother's parents before them. I was born here. We moved away when I was 8. 9, but they never sold their cottage. It's mine. Ah. He wasn't going to say any more than that. She saw a hint of movement out of the corner of her eye and glanced up at the rafters. Kaz was there, draped around one of the cobwebs-choked beams. He waved a tendril at her, and she exhaled. He's okay, just hiding. She wished she could have done that. And you are? Laren Maver. I live in the base of the cliff near town. Noticed your boat in the cove and came to see who was using the old Orobadan cottage. Around here, we like to keep an eye out for each other. Outer Islanders care for our own. She'd heard that dozens of times as a kid. This far away from the cities and larger islands, they didn't have much choice, but it was also a point of pride. She supposed it was a reasonable explanation for why he was here. He couldn't have known she'd be asleep on a dusty old daybed. She still didn't like the way he filled the entire doorway, blocking the exit. You mean you're nosy? He smiled and the expression transformed him from ordinary to stunningly handsome. It was like the sun coming out from behind the clouds over a stormy sea. She found herself smiling back without meaning to. As soon as she realized what she was doing, she frowned. Sure, Laren said. That's what's one word for it. We prefer neighborly, but nosy is probably just as accurate. Still could have been a murderer. She reminded herself. There was no law that said dangerous men couldn't be handsome. On the other hand, he hadn't moved any closer since she'd screamed. In fact, in retrospect, he looked almost as spooked as she felt. She was suddenly very aware that her hair was matted on one side and her mouth tasted like peanuts. This wasn't how she wanted to meet neighbors. In fact, she'd been hoping to not meet them at all. It would been simpler if she'd stayed unnoticed. Fewer variables, fewer problems. She'd wished he'd leave.
She is so real.
Hi, Takio. Thanks for the head pats. What brings you back to Caltry? He asked. Kyla considered a half-dozen answers, but she settled on the one that was simplest and requires the least amount of reliving recent traumatic events. I'd had enough of the city. Ah. Miraculously, he seemed to find that answer both reasonable and sufficient. Would you like help? He looked around the cottage as if cataloging all the myriad things she could possibly need help with, which was, a rough estimate, everything. Settling in? Absolutely not. The last thing she wanted him to do was stay and help. The entire point of coming to Caltry was to hide away in a place where she knew no one and no one knew her. And she and Kaz and the books would be safe. Thanks, but I have it covered. He raised an eyebrow as if he didn't believe her, but he didn't argue or try to convince her otherwise, which she appreciated. Well, if you change your mind, I'm just through the woods, down by the shore. He waved toward the northwest. It's the Mur Horse Farm, with the yellow house near the water. Drop by any time. She had absolutely zero intentions of ever doing that, but she thanked him. Best not to be rude to their new neighbor, especially if it got him to leave faster. He left, taking his scythe, and she watched him out the window. Through a hole in ivy, he strolled away. A few minutes later, the green had swallowed him entirely. It's okay. book is so funny so far.
I tried everything. Coffee, Pomodoro, and binaural beats.
Cass climbed down from the rafters. When he reached the floor, Kyla scooped him up and he let her. He patted her back with one of his tendrils. When her heart had calmed down enough, she lowered him back to the floor. Sorry, she said. It's fine. I was so startled that I nearly lost half my soil ball. She examined him. He still seemed as leafy as ever. Are you okay? Fine, I could get more. Lots of nutrients in the earth here. It's much richer than in Elysium. You should eat something, and perhaps bathe. Ouch. I can help what I smell. You don't even have a nose, or ears, or eyes, or a mouth. He was a dog-sized potless plant who defied all natural laws. She wished she'd been able to study the spell that had created him. It had to have been fascinatingly complex. All she knew was he'd begun as simple as a single spider plant seed. She never asked what other ingredients were involved. It seemed too personal a question. Now who's being insulting? Cass said. Sorry. Subtly, she sniffed her own armpits. She smelled like the sea and sweat. A fresh shirt would help. She should have packed more than a few change of clothes. At least he seems friendly, Cass said. Until he comes back to murder us in our sleep. Kyla glanced at the door again. I don't think he plans to do that. I hope. After the initial scare, he'd taken pains not to startle her. Most likely he was just nosy and intrusive rather than inactively dangerous. It's not his fault he's tall and 10 times stronger than me. He probably had no idea how he looked unexpected in the dark. He hadn't been trying to loom over her. That was a large blade he carried. Indeed it was, very alarming. City folks didn't carry that kind of equipment around, at least not usually. To be fair, she didn't really know what most people carried around, since she hadn't spent any time on the streets or canals in years. Maybe scythes were in fashion? Who knew? Most likely, though. Larens carried it for practical reasons. Whatever paths used to lead to the cottage had been swallowed by the forest years ago. It wouldn't have been easy for him to reach the house without the scythe. He must use it to hack through this overgrowth. Kaz shuddered. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. I've never let anyone hurt you. Kyla said stoutly. That's a nice sentiment. But what would you do? Scream? Throw books at him? Fair point, though. She'd never throw a book, which, with luck, he wouldn't come back, and it wouldn't be an issue. Instead of replying, she chose to look around the cottage. Now that it was daylight, she could see it was unkept. It was the kindest adjective she could think of. Run down. Derelict. Disheveled. Neglected. Unloved. Barely remembered. Abandoned for years. Alone. Just like me. With Kaz scouting through the cottage, she reminded herself that she wasn't alone, and she hadn't been abandoned. At least not deliberately.
How did her parents die, though?
Her family had moved to this capital city to follow their dreams and give her the opportunity to pursue hers. They hadn't intended to leave her. They died from an illness that no one could have predicted or prevented.
Well, that was fucking... Wow. Now I know.
After that, she had chosen voluntarily to throw herself into her work at the library. As for finding herself without family or friends beyond a self-aware spider plant, that had merely happened over time. Like the dust, the dirt, the leaves, and the cobwebs sneaking in here over time, Okay, yes, she was a lot like this cottage. She could admit that the aptness of the metaphor. It can be cleaned up, Kyla said, made homelike. She started to find a safe place to store the spellbooks, perhaps in her parents' bedroom. For now, books could stay in the crates, but she'd make sure the back room was sealed against leaks and drafts before she set up shelves. And she'd have to ensure they were kept safe from prying eyes as well. It would not do for anyone to discover them. What if they tried to take them from her? What if they were afraid of the Emperor's wrath and tried to destroy them? Of course, what if they weren't afraid and tried to use them? She was fully aware that having the books was an enormous responsibility. Many were the only copies that existed, which made them irreplaceable and priceless. And all were original works, which meant they had none of the errors that occurred in copying. Given the destruction she'd witnessed, she might possess the last of the greatest treasure of the Crescent Island Empire. The books had to be protected, first and foremost. She had to prioritize what was most important after all. And it would be nice if no one noticed that she'd kind of sort of stolen them. I mean, if nobody knows. Hauling the crates of boxes up the shorestone steps, Kyla regretted shooing away her new, friendly, muscly neighbor. He could have carried a lot of books, though he probably would have asked why she had so many, where she had gotten them, and were they all hers. Really, it was best if she did this herself. She liberated some excess lines from the boat and looped it around the crates. The wheels helped on the dock, which miraculously held, but when she reached the stone steps, after some contemplation, she had a solution. Not a good solution, but a serviceable one. Her parents' bedroom door, which was already off its hinges, would act like a ramp. After fetching the door and laying it on the bottom few steps, she put her plan into action. Shoving with all her might, she rolled the first crate up the ramp door. Resting it very precariously on the steps, hurriedly moved the door to cover the next set of steps, and repeated the procedure until she reached level ground in front of the cottage. And then she did it again for the next crate. By the time she'd finished transporting all the crates, she was soaked in sweat and all her muscles felt wobbly. Her back was screaming at her, as were her calves, and her head throbbed. She missed the library lift. In retrospect, it might have been easier to unpack the crates and carry the books in stacks up the steps. It would have required a lot of trips, but perhaps it would have spared the door. On her back, calves, and head. Of course, she didn't think of that until after the task was complete and after she had hauled up the sacks, provisions, and supplies she'd brought. Kyla stumbled inside to see that Kaz had been busy as well, using his tendrils. He'd swept everywhere he could reach. The twigs, leaves, and other debris were piled in one corner. The cobwebs were gone from the rafters, and dust, well, it was mostly all over him. "No, we both need baths," Kyla said. His leaves drooped. But it was worth it. She added quickly. The front door wasn't clean yet, but it was vastly improved. She could see the wood grain of the floor, as well as the color of the chairs, a deep earth brown. Acorns and flowers had been carved into the chair backs, and the woven seats were frayed, but still whole. The daybed, stripped of the dusty quilt and no longer overwhelmed by leaves and branches, looked like a place one could lie down, rather than a nest for an enormous mouse. "You made phenomenal progress." He perked back up. Kyla crossed into the kitchen sink. It had a pump that used to draw from a well. Theoretically, it should still work. If it didn't, she remembered the stream in the forest that fed into the waterfall from the village, and there was a bucket for bailing out water into the well. She could use that if she needed to. She didn't, though. Relished the idea of hauling water the entire way to the cottage every time she wanted to bathe and not die of hydration. Looking out the window over the sink, she tried to see the forest, but the grass was laced with vines. All she could see was green, pierced by slivers of sunlight. This is honestly really funny. "Are you going to work for us?" she asked the pump. It was made of cast iron in a carved-over brass basin. An old kitchen towel hung from the racks on the side of the sink, and the counter was bare except for a few jars and glass pitcher. She remembered her mother using to put fresh flowers in that pitcher. Behind her, Kaz asked, "Are you talking to an inanimate object? Because that's odd." Says the talking plant. Ouch. Imagine having beef with the plant. Stealing herself, she raised and lowered the handle. No water, not even a trickle or a drip or a hint of it doing anything. She raised and lowered it again and again. At last, she heard a distant gurgle. She pumped harder, and it squeaked with the effort. After 5 more pumps, a blast of brownish water spurted out into the faucet and splashed into the sink. Surprised, she jumped back. "That's it," Cass said to the pump. "You can do it!" Kyla pumped again. Soon, the water flowed clear and cold. She cupped her hands and drank it. It was sweeter and crisper than any water she'd tasted in Elysium. She found one of her mother's old dish towels that had been left behind, rinsed out the dust, and then used it to wash as much of herself as she could. She shivered as the cold water touched her skin, but she gritted her teeth and washed off the grime and sweat. Half the towel was black when she finished, and she realized it was soot from the burning city. For an instant, Kyla could only stare at it. Until that moment, she hadn't let herself truly think about it. The loss of the library, her home, her life. The loss of all those homes and lives, and the books. She knew she could care more. She should care more about the people of Elysium than the books, but the spell books had been her family, the library had been her home, and her work had been her life. Her eyes felt hot and her throat clogged. But she shook her head. This wasn't a time to wallow or grieve. She had to figure out what she was doing, how they were going to live. She had to make this into a place where they could hole up for as long as necessary, and where the precious knowledge they'd rescue could be preserved. But without the library, without its stacks and its order and its peace and its historical culture and political importance, what was the point? Who was she with all of it gone? What kind of future did she have? Cash jumped into the sink. "More water, please." He's so cute. She pumped water onto him, and using another towel, helped wash the dirt, grime, and soot from each of his leaves. When he climbed out, his soil ball was saturated. He dripped dirty water over the counter, which then trickled onto the wood floor. "What's first?" Cass asked. Then he asked, "Are you okay?" Kyla nodded, unable to speak, and then she shook her head. "The library." He laid a leaf on her hand. "I know. Everything we worked for, believed in, cared about. We'll be all right. We'll make it all work, Kyla. You can't break down on me now. You're all I've got." She sucked in air and studied herself. They only had each other, and so, like Lauren had said, they had to look out for each other. Where to begin? "We have to make this our home," Kyla said. After she dragged the crates of books into the back room, Kyla surveyed the house. First step was she needed to see what they had. Next step was to figure out what they need. Pull everything out. We'll take stock. That was what they did whenever the fresh donation of books and manuscripts arrived at the library. First, she sorted through the collection, spread it all out, and see what they had, catalog it, and then proceed as appropriate. And so Kyla and Kaz dug in. Together they rooted through the house and dragged out everything in a cabinet or closet or drawer into the center of the main room. She was pleasantly surprised at how much remained. Her parents had abandoned a heap of old Caltrain clothes. Selecting one of the island dresses, Kyla shook it out. Dust plumed in the air. The skirt was a quilt of blue. Sky blue, sapphire blue, and sea blue, all stitched together with silvery threads and hemmed with silver ribbon, and the bodice was a soft white blouse. Not at all the city style, but it was perfect for a picnic in a garden or a stroll on the shore. With a few repairs, she could wear a lot of her mother's abandoned clothes, and she could use her father's for she wasn't sure what, but they were nice to have. She'd find a use for them. If nothing else, she could chop the fabric up into cleaning rags, or perhaps learn to quilt. There was a moth-eaten blanket in one closet, in addition to the old quilts on the daybed and her parents' bed. Each quilt had its own patterns. One was comprised of colors of the sunset and sewn in stripes of rays of light, while another was the brown and pale green of a spring garden with pieces cut like petals and sewn like abstract flowers. That's cute. You left so many beautiful things behind. She'd had no idea. She'd been too little to help with much of the packing, though she remembered she'd tried. Carrying an armful of clothes into the kitchen, Kyla dumped them into the sink to soak in water. She planned to use the excess line from the boat to hang them out in the sun to dry. They'll be even more beautiful once they're clean. The kitchen cabinet produced more treasures, a few plates, bowls, and cups. Each bowl was painted with pictures of strawberries and raspberries, and the plates were painted with tomatoes and asparagus. The teacups bore delicate pictures of flowers. In one drawer, she found a decent knife with a carved antler handle. In another, she found a somewhat warped but still usable pot, as well as a frying pan and a tea kettle. One chest held a stack of slightly yellowed but yet serviceable papers, used to a librarian normally, but less vital right now. Of greater interest was the bucket behind the door, and in the closet, miraculously, a broom and a shovel, as well as a full set of gardening tools. Hoe, trowel, clippers, and a set of leather gardening gloves with only a few holes in them. She also found a pantry closet full of empty glass canning jars and bottles that had once been used to store fruit, vegetables, and herbs. Her parents hadn't planned a garden or can in the city, and so they'd left all their equipment behind. She hadn't even begun to explore the yard they used to hold their garden. It was so overgrown that the fences were swallowed in vines, but perhaps she could clear it, plant a few vegetables, and see if anything edible had survived their abandonment. Kyla began to feel a shred of hope. This was a good hope. It could be made whole again, and so can we. Kyla scrubbed the blanket and the clothes as best as she could, and then strung up the line. Between the corner of the house and the tree, there was an old plant basket hooked on the corner of the house. This is gonna be my last chapter. Or maybe. Oh yeah, this will be my last one of the night. She spread the wet clothes out on the line and admired how much better they looked already. The blues and the greens had brightened from the wash. She then stuffed the quilt from the daybed into the bucket of water and left that to soak. Together, she and Class cleaned the kitchen. They swept the near petrified mouse droppings out of the cabinets, washed the plates and glasses and utensils, and scrubbed the privy until the copper bathtub shone, and the walls were a cheerful white again. She found sprigs of lavender in the front herb bed, wrapped their stems with a ribbon, and hung them above the privy wash basin. Once the daybed quilt was clean, she washed into an armload of faded but usable towels. At midday, they took a break, and Kyla ate some of the peaches and pecans she'd brought from the library. At least she'd been clever enough to stash them in the boat, though she wished she'd packed more. While Kaz rooted himself in a sunny spot where the floorboards were broken enough to expose the earth beneath. When she finished, she screwed the lid back on the peach jar and stored it in the cabinet. She then stepped back and allowed herself to think about the one thing that their search hadn't produced: food. She had a finite amount of it from the city, enough for a few days if she stretched it. She needed more very soon. She never had to worry about the possibility of hunger before. All her meals had been provided by the library kitchen, delivered via chutes, and Kyla was only just beginning to realize what she had right here was all she had. And that was unsettling. She felt a bit like she was stranded on the very top rung of the library ladder with the safety rope unclipped. Yet she could reclaim the garden, but it would take time. Also seeds, and maybe some clue how to garden. She never planted anything before. The same went for the ocean. She knew there were fish and crabs out on the cove, but she didn't know how to fish or crab. What was that what it was called? I can't fucking read. And I'm reading. She didn't even know what the verb was, much less how to do it. And as for the wild berries, yes, she could gather whatever she found, as well as nuts and mushrooms. But how was she to know what was edible and what wasn't, if she accidentally poisoned herself? She needed medicine. If she hurt herself, she became sick. She'd also need soap to keep herself clean, paste to keep her teeth healthy. But before any of that, she needed food. Fruit, vegetable, bread, milk, cheese, meat. At least enough to last until we're self-efficient, she thought. Once she figured out how to garden and fish and had the basics for hygiene and medicine, she wouldn't need outside supplies. A little voice inside her whispered that it wouldn't be that simple. But she resolutely pushed it away. I just need enough to get by for now. One trip into the village. She'd use the coins she had to purchase the bare essentials, and then they'd hold up here and not bother anyone, and no one would have any reason to bother them. Looking at what they had and didn't have, Kyla didn't see any way around it. It was foolish to think she could build a life here just from what they found and what they brought. Besides, the fantasy of living here unnoticed had already been broken when the neighbor had discovered her sleeping. No, there was no denying it. She was going to have to talk to people. Okay. Oh, okay, this main character, I love her. Oh man, that was so funny. Kind of sad, her circumstances, what was going on. But that was so funny. Ugh. All right. Am I streaming tomorrow? That's a good question. That's a good question. Am I streaming tomorrow? I think I am. Pretty sure I am. Yeah, pretty sure I am. Yes, I am streaming tomorrow. Pio Fiore. All right. So, with that, yeah, streaming Pio Fiore tomorrow at 3. So, with that, I will see you guys tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central Time. So, good night, goodbye, or whenever you're watching this. Bye.